Hey, everybody, on here coming to you with the connecting codes, insights for what is happening in world events for May of 2025. For those of you who are not familiar with your work, I am the author of a book called The Code Journey, and that is this book right here. I know it's a little bit blurry in the picture in there, but every year I put out a new edition. I'm currently working on 2025. And so the insights that I give in these videos are actually coming out from the book and information that I wrote a year ago. So it's not like I'm looking at world events today going, oh, what are the energy patterns today from when we're right on top of everything. It's actually stuff that I wrote a year ago. So that kind of makes it real interesting to always see how things are playing out when they've been written that long ago, when I've looked at them that long ago, and to see them coming up and coming forward. And this is a work that blends a lot of different modalities, up to 50 different modalities. It's not Intel. It's not part of that Intel community at all. It's simply looking at the energy currents and different things that play into those currents, how they're interacting with each other, to help that unfold what is happening in the world. So every month I put out a video about what's coming up in our world events, what types of things we're likely to see happening in the world. No, it's not going to identify a lot of times very specific people or very specific dates. We do have time periods of dates in there, but it's more about identifying the energy patterns. So we understand, for example, if there's going to be a lot of chaos and death energy or something like that, it's not the time we want to be out at a protest because things are probably going to go wrong and it's probably not going to be a very good thing to do. So one step at a time, I guess, with it. And this is that component of working from foresight, right? So if we understand that the currents are a certain way, we can make wiser choices. We can pay attention to certain things. We can be prepared for things. You know, it's just like knowing if a storm's going to come in. If you know you got a really bad storm coming in, well, it's probably a good idea to have some flashlights on hand, to have some extra water on hand. It's the same kind of concept with this work. It's just about using the wisdom to say, okay, here's what I've got to be alert to. I may or may not be able to do anything about it, but if I'm aware of it, I can make smarter personal choices. I know where I need to focus my energy and what I need to be paying attention to. So a lot of people have really loved these videos. Matter of fact, just recently I put a post out with the Pope when the Pope passed, and on the same day, Klaus Schwab resigned from the World Economic Forum. That's on my social media pages. So you can look for that if you want to go back and look at it, where the codes actually showed the where there was a tendency or an opening for that to happen. And so these are some of the things that are just really interesting to see what actually does come to pass under these influences. So let's get started in here because these always take a while to get through when we're looking at all the influences that are coming up. And again, these are influences that are coming up for May of 2025 in here. I am currently working on the 2026 book, and that will be released probably mid-August, somewhere around there, around the third week of August. That's usually when I try to get it out so that my stores have it where they can order it in. And it's not all world events, by the way. It's a personal growth tool. It's personal development stuff. It's, you know, a little bit more than just world events in there, but it also touches on the currents that we're going to see come up in world events as well. So let's take a look at the month. One of the first things that I see coming up in the month is this impulsiveness energy, this drive where people are acting without thinking. And this is going to probably bring some danger. That you'll have those people who are pushing people to act impulsively, and then you'll have those people that are just acting impulsively for whatever reason. And a lot of times that comes out of people being pushed through urgency or through fear. They get a lot of pressure put on them. We got to do this now, right? So you hear that a lot of times, like with the environmental issues. It's like, oh, we only have 5 years left to live or 10 years left to live. And, you know, none of them have happened, but that's what they use to get people to do things that they normally wouldn't do, or if they gave it a little bit of thought or researched it, they would realize, oh, okay, this is not going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years. We've got maybe 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 years before it actually even becomes an issue, if it does, in there. And the key with this impulsive energy is to shift from the impulsiveness to the spontaneity. So when we look at this, the impulsiveness is really taking action without thinking about it, right? Like when you go into a store and it's like a big sale and the salesperson's like, oh, you better take advantage of it because it ends today. And so you act in the moment. You don't walk away and think about it. That's impulsiveness. But the spontaneity is really about getting into the experience. It's really about stepping into opportunities that are being presented to us to participate in favorable ways. And that is going to be the key to success. So we want to think about spontaneity, being that openness, being in that flexibility to take advantage of good opportunities if they come up. So it can play both ways. We're also probably going to see a lot of things coming out around affairs and sexual perversions being exposed. I think one of the pieces, and I'm sorry, my nose is itching. I don't know why it does that every time I create these videos, but not only will we be seeing these affairs and sexual perversion stuff being exposed more, but I think we're going to be seeing a lot of honeypots used. And for those that aren't familiar with the honeypot term, that's basically, for example, they'll send a really good-looking girl out to go appeal to like a CEO of a company or some head of whatever organization and take them somewhere, sit down, have a drink, have conversation with them, and then get a lot of information out of them. That's what a honeypot is. So they're somebody that's used to entice people to do it. So I think we might have a lot coming out through honeypots during this month. We're going to have people that are going to try to sell us into things again without thinking about them. And we saw a lot of this type of thing in the pandemic, for example, right? Look, we're going to give you free donuts for a year. We're going to give you this. And none of it was worth it. When you really look at it, none of it was worth it. It wasn't like any spectacular thing that they were giving people. They were just trying to get people to, again, go after that dangling carrot, go after the prize without thinking what was attached to it. So we really need to honor taking that time to step back, walk away from things, do our research, and sit with it and not be in that impulsiveness, not feel like we have to act on the moment because we don't. They're just trying to push us to act in the moment so that they can move forward with stuff that they want to move forward with, which probably isn't very good for us. And we'll probably regret it if we don't take the time to think about it. So definitely be alert to that whenever you hear somebody giving what sounds kind of like a sales pitch to you, even if it's wrapped in a humble package, or even if it's, wrapped in a this is for the good of all, or whatever package is wrapped in. We need to be careful of that in here. And that is going to be coming up a lot during the month. We're also probably going to be seeing a lot of shifts in world leaders, CEOs, the heads of companies, and major influencers. So we may see a shift in who is in the spotlight. We may see a turnover in people. And we have to be careful because the replacements might be worse than the person stepping down. Now, we just saw an example of that with Klaus Schwab, right, which I mentioned, and he stepped down the same day that the Pope passed away. For those that didn't know, and there's some interesting connections in that because the Pope was 88 when he died, and Klaus Schwab is 88. So I'm sure people could go down a bunch of rabbit holes with that in there and why that particular day. And again, I did make a post on it, so that might shed some light on some things too. But the person that's stepping in for him, so we know Klaus Schwab has been all about, you got to eat the bugs, you'll own nothing, you'll be happy, blah, 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 and that format. Well, the person that stepped in used to be the CEO of Nestle. And his philosophy on life is not just you'll eat bugs, you'll own nothing, you'll be happy, is you're not entitled to have water. The average common person is not entitled to have water. So talk about getting worse. These are the things we have to watch out for. And this is something we're going to see a lot more of coming up in May. So, you're going to see people probably out there going, yay, this person's stepping down. Yay, this person's been removed from this position. And they'll be like, oh, crap, this is what we've got going in instead of that. So be alert to that. It may not always be a great thing. Yes, it's great that those people are stepping out. And on one hand, that means that we're getting, further into the core of the corruption, as they would say, because what happens is when they're desperate, when they're saying, okay, this person's no longer popular. Klaus Schwab, you're no longer popular. We can no longer use you anymore. So we got to get you out of this position. We're going to put somebody else in. And it's like, they come in and they're like, okay, who's the next extreme person? Because we need like somebody who's more extreme to get the job done, sort of thing. Like we need a bad guy in there. That's the kind of concept that they work from. But of course, this really never works out for them, right? Because, what happens is it just exposes the agendas that much more. So in the codes, we look at this and we see that the exposures that are going to be coming out is also going to force resignation. So when they put the bad guy in, then that's going to bring more exposure and that's going to force more resignations along the way. So they're really just kind of taking themselves down in that aspect. And these people may just shift into different positions of power, which may also actually give them more power. So I would be on the alert to that. Like, where does Klaus Schwab go from here? Does he go into ruling a country? Does he go into the WHO, for example, or into the UN? And, so maybe he left the World Economic Forum, but he might go into a position that has more power to it. And those are the other pieces we have to be careful of in there, because that is definitely something that we're going to be seeing, whether it's him or whether it's somebody else. So again, another caution, it's kind of like just the actors are being changed out. The actors, the people in the positions, they're just being shifted and adjusted around to get more reaction, more fear out of people. And to give them more power to do things. And so again, you get these bigger extremists in, and then you move the person that was in there before to a position with greater power. Now you've got like double the force working against you in a sense, in there. So we've still got some things to face that probably are not going to be very pleasant to face. This is a big year of responsibility with us, and that's in the codes for all of 2026. So we're really going to have to buckle down and do the work. And I get it, it's not fun, but if we do it, we can unfold better things moving forward in the future. It's stuff that we're going to have to face and we're going to have to deal with. We also are going to see a lot of whistleblowers coming out. And again, I think that this is going to be interesting. You'll have two components. You'll have the whistleblowers that are coming out from the inside who have been very closely connected to the core people, or the heads of companies or organizations coming out. And then again, you've got the honeypots, which are bringing out information from people that are spilling the beans on things, as they say, in there. And those people, they're taking a huge risk. I mean, they pretty much know, hey, if I come out, that could be it for me. They know the risk they're taking, but they are so pushed to the point that it's like, okay, things have gone too far and I can't stay silent anymore. So these are the people that have been pretty much okay with the corruption up until now, brushing it off, going, well, it's no big deal. It's not a big deal. But now it's like, oh, I guess it is a big deal. And now, it's gone extreme. It's kind of like that person that says, well, they're only doing a joint a day. And then that joint a day shifts and it becomes, lethal doses of meth or fentanyl or something else, and it's like, oh, I guess we do have a drug issue. It's it's the same kind of concept and pattern in there. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, I guess I need to do something now. So that's what we're going to be see coming out with that. We need to support a lot of self-sufficiency. And why? Because self-sufficiency equals power. So the more that the average person comes into self-sufficiency, the more we keep the power within the people and not in these leaders, rulers, CEOs, heads of companies, heads of organizations, and things like that. Because a lot of those people, I mean, granted, technically, their position is about supposed to be about serving the public. It's supposed to be about doing what's best for the people, but that's not what's happening these days. So we need to build the power within the people as much as possible. So when we do that, it's almost doesn't matter what position these people are in because they won't have anything to work with. It's kind of like if there's a company that is selling things that hurt your kids, you stop shopping at that company. It's just common sense, really, in a way. And you say, yeah, you know what? We don't need that actually. We don't need that food. We will just grow it in our own backyard or that sort of thing. So we just won't be buying there and spending our money. And without our money, they can't really do anything. They start to crumble. They start to fall apart. They don't have anything to work with. And so that means they either have to come around to us or they don't exist. So these are things that, again, build that self-sufficiency. This is going to be a huge, huge thing. And hopefully we will see more things coming out. Those people who are actually working for the people that are in positions of power, hopefully they're going to be passing, whether that's legislation or taking action in some way that does give greater sufficiency to people. And those are the people that we need to be supporting. And again, I believe you don't attach to one person and say, whatever this person does, I'm going to do it and I'm going to follow it. I'm one of those people that says, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing the thing that is going to benefit people? Are you doing things that are moving us to be able to have a healthy existence and not have a bunch of toxins and chemicals pushed on it? Are you doing the right thing in regards to the environment? Are you doing the right thing in regards to this or that? So, and I shouldn't use that word right so much. I don't really like that, but you understand what I'm saying, right? I am going to stand with whatever person is standing with God or divine source in the moment. And if they're standing there today, I will be with them today. If they are not standing there tomorrow, I won't be with them tomorrow. And I may stand with them on some things and I may not stand with them on other things. So that's where we want to look at it. So support people when they're right, don't support them when they're wrong, sort of aspect. And in the end, that leads us to a pretty good place because it's also a way of holding people accountable without having to be in this attack and battle mode with them. It's kind of like, well, if you want to do your job, I'll get behind you. If you want to do what's good for people, I'll get behind you. But if you don't, I'm not going to stand behind you. And again, as we know, these people, they can't be in these positions if nobody is supporting them in there. So just definitely worth thinking about. We have a lot of power battles coming up, and that is also going to cause shifts in job markets. We're going to see a change where products come from, where they're being made. We may see some businesses close and others rise up, and we've seen this. Some of these businesses who do not want to do anything with America, and they will only buy from China, for example. And there's a place, for some of the Chinese made products and stuff like that. But here again, we don't want that to be our only source and our only aspect. So some of these places that are completely reliant on China only things are probably going to go down. They're probably going to reduce locations. We saw that here in the States. We have a store called Big Lots, and that was, part of what brought them down with things. Now, again, a lot of these things that people get from China, and you have to remember there's many steps that led to the push to moving all of that purchasing overseas with things. And people say, well, it's more cost effective. Yeah, but there's also bigger pieces to look at, as in the fact of, the torture, the slave labor aspects, the child labor aspects, a variety of different aspects to look at, which are very horrendous, um, tormenting things to people. And honestly, people know my situation, a lot of them. They know that I'm challenged. They know I don't have a roof over my head all the time with things. They know my struggles, at least people who have been following my work for a while. And I'm still sitting here saying, you know what? That $1 item isn't worth the atrocities of human torture. And I could find a way to do without it, or I can find another option, or I can wait for somebody to put something on sale, or whatever the case is. But it's not worth those human atrocities. And chances are the more that stuff moves back, for example, into the US or into somebody's country, then actually it can be produced less expensively. And it brings more competition to the market, which will drive prices down instead of up on things. So actually, it's not going to be that much, you know, it's not going to be a horrendous thing for most people, even those people who are like myself and struggle financially with some things. So that's going to be a big thing. So I think we're going to see a lot of this shift. So we're going to probably hear more about companies coming back into the States, building up factories here, building up stores here, moving manufacturing here, shifting a lot of things, because a lot of these people kind of got forced out of the countries because there were things that were made unbearable for them here. And there were all bigger agendas behind doing that. And, again, it's just, we could do hours and hours, right? On that. So we won't go there. You can research some of it yourself and find out, more about what's behind that. But it's a good thing when we bring things back into our country, no matter what your country is, it actually benefits and strengthens the country a lot more, as opposed to that dependency. And that's another aspect of self-sufficiency, right? Yes, we can do business with other countries, but we shouldn't be dependent on them. And more countries are coming to realize that, like, hey, we have to make ourselves self-sufficient. So it's also a big piece of that in there. And again, this is going to create some shifts. So a lot of people say, well, what about all the jobs that are going to be lost? They're not going to be totally lost. That a lot of these things, people might just shift industries. Instead of working at Dollar Tree, they might work at the mini mart. It's just going to shift a little bit. It's actually not going to have a huge impact like job losses or something like that. Matter of fact, if anything, we'll probably see more jobs coming up and more jobs that might be higher paying. Actually, for a lot of people, when we look at some of the manufacturing jobs, some of those are just going to be automated equipment. I hate to say that, but that's true. But again, it will open different opportunities up. So I don't think we're really going to see like huge job losses so much as there will be shifts going on there in the market. Okay. True leaders at this time, they're going to be really focusing on cleaning up the food supply. And again, I emphasize true leaders because unfavorable leaders that are working against the people, corrupt leaders, they're going to be working on tainting the food supply and damaging it. Whereas true leaders are going to be putting this emphasis of, hey, we got to clean up our water, we got to clean up our air, we got to clean up our food supply, we got to get the garbage out of it. I'm mixed right now with RFK Jr., and I'm just going to be honest about that because I always see these posts going out that are saying, we're probably going to do this, we're probably going to do that. And they're focusing on certain things like the dyes, which is great. Let's get those out of our food. But there's also a lot of other detrimental things that don't need to be in the food that we need to get out of the food that actually can be more damaging than those dyes in there. So those are, again, more components that we have to look at in there and say, can we get these other components out? What are you actually going to do? When are these things actually going to pass? Because I keep hearing a lot of talk, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. We're probably going to do that. Well, probably is not the same as doing it. Okay. I support a lot of these people. I think a lot of them are good people. I think they have the ability to make a lot of good shifts and changes, but probably isn't good enough. It's got to actually be done that makes a difference. So people know that are close in my circle. I've said, here's my concerns. I'm counting them. Here's my concerns about people. Here's what I'm seeing. And, that is not matching up with other things. And I want to see better action in these things, not shortcuts, because I just did a video on my regular channel about shortcuts. We don't want shortcuts, but I do want to see actual action and not just we're thinking about it. Thinking is not putting it in motion. It's not getting the job done. So that's something we want to be, again, paying attention to. Let's get behind those people. I think in May, we're also going to see a bigger focus being put on our farmers and our manufacturing needs, at least here in the US. So this is going to be a big thing. This is going to be absolutely wonderful to see this happen because our farmers need to be supported, and they need to be supported not just growing food with pesticides and chemicals and things like that. They need to be supported in regenerative farming. We need to be supporting them in organic processes, non-GMO processes, these sorts of things. So I'm hoping that we'll see more come out in that. That's what it's indicating in the codes right now. And I think this will be a good thing because this will be a big step towards strengthening the country, strengthening the people, strengthening the self-sufficiency in there, which will be really favorable. We're going to see an emphasis on strengthening and rebuilding infrastructure. Now, there's some really big things coming out about infrastructure here in the last couple of days of April. And this is going to be huge. And I think we're going to start seeing projects come up of we're going to be redoing our infrastructure, like, our bridges and our roadways and different things are planes, things like that, because we've been getting, again, a lot of the metals, a lot of the materials for that out of China. And there's been a lot of things that have been put in those Chinese materials that have been really unfavorable. They actually have things that are, I can't remember the exact terminology. It's like N-bomb or something like that. I don't know, something like that. In there that is actually allows them to sabotage it. It actually allows them to, get in and hijack technology on different things. And there's a whole realm. Again, you can go out and research it because I'm not going to spend the time in this video to do it. But there's a whole bunch of thing about the metals that we are getting, and they're not as good as actually what we can produce here in the United States. So I think we're going to start hearing a lot come out about our infrastructure getting redone during May. And that's going to be a good thing as well, because again, that's going to bring a lot of jobs. That'll bring a lot of good paying jobs for people that'll be working on those projects in there. Let's see, what else do we have going on? Increase in manufacturing facilities. I kind of already covered that. Again, I think we're going to see more and more companies coming back in saying, okay, we'll put a factory up in the US, we'll build it in the US, we'll use US materials, things like that. There's a lot of incentives being put out for companies to do that. And that is a good thing. Again, let's get the technology back into the US. Let's get these things happening here. And I think that's going to work to our advantage. We're going to see also what I'm seeing in here for this month, major cuts to government positions, particularly those positions that are not useful and that are supporting agendas. So it's about removing some of the activism out of government agencies. Now, if you have good people that are in those positions, because, right, we have a lot of people that went into these positions and, they just didn't really grasp everything behind it or whatever, we'll probably see them repositioned again into other areas or things like that where their skills can be utilized. So we may not see a loss of job. A lot of people, the news, they like to promote these things like oh, look at all these cuts that were made and they've alleviated 20,000 jobs here and 10,000 jobs there. Well, a lot of those people actually, their positions were cut, their jobs were cut, but then they were actually given jobs in other areas. So, we don't actually have like a 30,000 job loss going on. And that's very deceiving when the media is um, putting those pieces of information out there. So consider that. I think, again, this is really about alleviating unnecessary positions that take us in unfavorable directions, or where the direction of those positions, the emphasis on those positions is not about strengthening our country or the citizens in it. It's about strengthening other agendas that are not favorable for the population in general. So again, this is returning power to the people. When we're doing this, it's just cutting the excess off of things that isn't needed in there. We also are going to want to look to strengthen currencies by paying off debt and moving currency to real assets. So this is going to be interesting because I know a lot of those currency people out there that are like reset, 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 let's get that gold going, let's get the backing going on things. And so they're probably got their ears perked up now at this point in the video. Um, so I think what we're going to be hearing about is how much debt we're paying off in May as a country, because we know we have a lot of debt out there. So where we've cut all these positions, we've generated these trillions of dollars in funds, massive amount of funds. And I think this is all part of, okay, we've cut all these positions, we've generated all these money, we've cut all these different things. So we've got all this money to work with and all the other components that are bringing money in. And it's like any sound business person is going to do. The first thing you do when you get a whole lot of money to work with is you go in and you pay your debts off. That's the first thing you do. If you get a big windfall, you go in and you pay all your debts off first, your debts, your loans, all of that stuff. And again, what does that do? That makes you stronger. It makes you more self-sufficient, all of these things. So you pay all of that off. And this is where I think we're going to see next month actually the start of the shift to going back to, whether that's gold back or silver backed or whatever it is, going back to real asset backed currencies in there. And I think that could be a really exciting thing to work with, because this in the long run does stimulate and thrive the economy in some really great and really strong ways out there. So I think that's going to be exciting to watch, because I think there's a lot of people who have been waiting for years and years and years of hearing, what is going to come out? How is this going to work? And I don't know for certain. This is just a hypothesis. Really, it's just strictly a hypothesis in my book. But it used to be, for example, when we had money at different points, because we've gone in and out of this, right, where money's been just not backed by anything. It's just not really been worth anything. And then we've had other periods where it has been asset backed. And it used to be like back in the 50s, the 60s, like that, you actually had copper in your pennies. So you actually had precious metals in the money you were carrying. There were silver dimes. So it actually had the precious metals in the money itself. And that is something I've been kicking around in my head that I could very much see happening when we talk about an asset-backed currency, and people are saying your dollar bills aren't going to be anything, this or that. Well, yeah, when they're tied to central bank systems, when they're, tied to the global banking systems, yeah, they're just paper with printing on it, basically, is what it is. So it doesn't have this value, and the more of it you print, the less value it has. But if you actually go back to putting metals and resources into the currency that people hold, now you're changing the game. And this is one of the things that I keep thinking in the back of my mind is going to happen. So that means, again, the resources are put into the people's hands and they're not sitting in the government's hands. And I think that's where the game changer is going to be with currencies, honestly. Is we may go back to it. Now we may see certain things again. Trump has alluded to this. We've heard about this being talked. Pennies aren't worth printing because if it costs you a nickel to print a penny, you're losing money on that deal, right? You're losing money on that. If you spend $5 to gain $1, you're losing money on that deal. So we might see something like pennies go out of circulation, which, if you've got old copper pennies and they're true copper, then you might want to hang on to those. That might be worth something somewhere down the line, but you're going to have to get back like into the mid 1900s or early 1900s to, get those kind of coins in there. So considering that, in there. So it will be interesting. It will be interesting to see what they do with actual dollar bills, which they can't be counterfeited. So again, if you have actually like precious metals or something that is being infiltrated into the dollar bills that you're receiving as currency, then again, you're holding something that is actually an asset as opposed to just holding paper. And that's going to be a game changer. That's going to be a huge game changer. And if they were to do something like that, it could really jack the value of the American dollar or American currency. Now, I know everybody wants to go digital currencies, and I'll tell you, I'm sure that there's a place. It's just like anything, it's a convenience. I get all the stuff as far as, Bitcoin and all of those stuff. And, I get it. I get what people are saying about it, but I have to stand with Lynette saying on this, in the sense of you don't have a physical asset in your hand. You don't have the precious metals sitting in your hand. It's all sitting out there. Even if you talk blockchain, blockchain is a technology. It's not a physical asset sitting in your hand. Now, if you're holding a physical asset in your hand, that's a different component. And this is where the precious metals become, valuable. So we could again see different things where the cryptocurrencies may not go away. I don't know that they'll ever go away because of the type of world we're living in today. But that being said, we may actually see components like the dollar become much, much more valuable. So it's going to be interesting to see what unfolds in May around that. Personally, I think it's going to be very favorable. Okay, moving on. Also in the month, I think we're going to see certain taxes getting dropped. And I specifically had written down when I wrote the information a year ago, taxes getting dropped on gifts. So like if somebody gives you money now, technically, we're not supposed to be taxed on that money anyways, up into a certain amount. But, as you know, if people give you money, like I have people that just donate money to my work, they send it through my donation site and send me $20 here, $20 there. Well, eventually that might add up, and maybe I have $3,000 or $4,000, and then all of a sudden it's being taxed on that. But, they're gifts. It's not like somebody just walked in and handed me $12,000 or something. I think we're going to see taxes getting dropped, and I don't know if they'll be totally alleviated. Um, they may get dropped, they may get totally alleviated on necessities. So we may see certain things like, basic clothing things or basic food items like fruit, vegetables, dairy, things like that, taxes being removed from those items. Um, we might see some taxes getting removed on cars, for example, because that's kind of a necessity. Now, maybe it doesn't get, you know, um, maybe it doesn't get reduced on, some of Elon's cars. And because those are luxury cars, they're not necessity cars, but we might see it on more of our economical, compact sort of cars or things like that. Also, I had a note in here about taxes getting dropped on inheritances. And this would be really good because this would help people, for example, if a family member passes away and they inherit a property. So instead of getting stuck with a lot of taxes on what they inherit, that there would be no taxes on that type of a thing. So it's going to be interesting to watch for those of you that like to watch the financial markets. That's going to be something you want to keep your eyes on, because that's also going to be a game changer for people in doing things. Lots of things getting decentralized to decrease world dominance by individuals, companies, foundations, governments. So it's not just the governments that are trying to centralize things. As we know, there's a lot of governments who are working in combination with organizations and companies. For example, GAVA, for example, or Gavi, excuse me, I think it's Gavi in there. The UN, the WHO, different things like this. And so the more we can decentralize, then the less power those people are going to have. And that's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing in there. Because then again, that brings the power back into the people. It removes the pressure. It gives them more possibilities, more options to work with when that power is decentralized, as opposed to one person saying, okay, everybody's going to get the same amount of food. Okay, everybody's going to get a loaf of bread, and everybody's going to get some cheese, and everybody's going to get some milk and eggs and a few vegetables. Well, okay, but if you give tomatoes to somebody who has multiple sclerosis or lupus or something like that, that's going to harm them, not help them. You can't do these massive, everybody gets the same thing. It doesn't work, because people have different needs. And when things get centralized, that's exactly what they're going to do. You're all going to get exactly the same thing, whether it benefits you or not. And that's a dangerous thing. That's a really, really dangerous thing. And this comes back to pushing the survival of the fittest mentality in there. And we don't want to be under that mentality. That's a lot of stress. That's a lot of pressure. That's really very aligned with genocidal philosophies in there. So we want to be very careful about that, because it's not just about that. We still need to have compassion pieces that are like, hey, let's take care of our veterans. Let's take care of our seniors. Let's take care of people in here that need to be taken care of, and not just, wipe them out because everybody's going to get the same thing, or only the strongest people can survive. So a lot of socialist countries, or even communist-based countries, or things like that, they operate more in that mentality, because for them, they're just looking at things from a very ledger-based mentality, which is, well, these people are not profitable to have in our society, so we just won't do things to help them, and then they'll fall off of the system. And that is not compassionate. These people that think these ways of living are compassionate, they're not in so many ways. So we really want to consider that. I mean, that's kind of like saying, well, Grandma, we know you've worked 70 years and paid into the system, but guess what? You're just not of use to us anymore. So that's it. You're not going to be cared for. You're not going to get anything. You just don't do that. You just don't do that. So big thing to watch out for. That's going to be a really great thing if we can get more decentralized with things. Okay. Also in the month energy from May 1st to May 20th, what we're going to see in here is more partnerships exposed. So again, more of these connections between government, private organizations, foundations, all of that, more of those networks being exposed in here. We're going to see probably some really good attempts to break our spirit, to break the hope of people, to make them feel like, hey, everything's headed in the wrong direction again, or we don't have any hope. This is not taking us where we want to go. So we have to be careful about letting our spirit get broken. We don't want to do that. We need to keep looking beyond the surface a little bit. We need to look a little deeper. We might have to just step away from things once in a while, just to regain and keep our spirit strong. And we just don't want to buy into, again, a lot of these narratives that are being fed to us from either side, because if you ask me, they're both feeding narratives. they're both doing that. We're going to see probably some struggle with people going on between their material needs and their values. And this can be part of the breaking the spirit component in there, where there may be something coming out where people are sitting there going, okay, if I stay true to my values and my belief systems and things like that, then I don't know how to feed my family. I don't know how to keep a roof over my head. And so they're going to feel like maybe I have no choice but to break my values. So we're going to have to be very careful about that, because I encourage you, once you break your values and you sell out, then it's only going to get worse from there. And this is where people have to know their value and their worth, and they have to say, this is what I need. And if you can't give it to me, I will go to somebody who can give it to me without me having to break my values. And this is going to require people holding their ground a bit. This is going to require people realizing that in reality, you don't have to do it, but they may make you believe that you do. They may make you believe that you have to choose. And this is part of those bigger agendas that underline the surface of things, is making you realize, like, oh, you have to choose one or the other. You can't have both, which that is a lie. You can. And actually, if you have the strength to stand in your values, if you have the strength to stand up for what is right, then the rest will show itself. Because I'm one of those people that can tell you over and over again, I've had no idea how my basic needs were going to get met. And when I stood in my values, no matter how hard it was, over and over again, they were met. And I had no clue how it was coming down to the last minute many times in there. So I encourage you to hang with the values. Don't buy this lie that you've got to give them up to meet material needs. And when this comes along, the really wise people will be coming back around saying, community, community, community in there, because they're going to be saying, yeah, you know what? If you have community going on where you live, guess what? You'll have your needs met. And you won't have to sacrifice your value for it. So that will be maybe a positive thing that we'll see come up from that. We also want to see that we have enough. Even if we're not living an extravagant life, we don't have to have extravagance. We don't have to have all this excess. I know that's been programmed into society, but it's about realizing we have enough. And when we realize, okay, maybe I don't have everything I want. Maybe I don't live a fancy lifestyle in the most expensive neighborhood or something like that, but I have enough. And a lot of times when people really get down to looking at it, it's like, you know what? Yeah, I do have enough. There is food on the table. There is a roof over my head, those sorts of things. Yeah, I guess I do have my basic needs met. And that's a huge thing. And I'm sorry, I don't know why the itching is so much worse today, but um, that is a huge thing. And getting back again to those fundamentals, that humble space that says, yeah, I'm actually good. I'm actually good. I'm not suffering in here. Progression for the good guys, the so-called good guys out there, right? We're probably going to see a lot of progression for the so-called good guys, a lot of progression for beneficial things going on that support and nourish divine presence in our world, that help people, things like that. But that's not going to just come free and clear, because when we have these major, rapid, sudden advancements and progressions going on, we're always going to get retaliation from those people that are working against God, divine source, that don't want divine presence in the world. They don't want goodness. They don't want kindness. They're cultivating hate. They're talking love and they're cultivating hate. And there's what they're doing. And so we're going to want to pay attention, because, again, this is going to show us more about who's on which side of the fence. We could see more military action coming up, particularly naval action coming up. We could see more assassinations or attempts at assassinations. And I think this is where our whistleblowers come in, because I think that there's going to be attempts made. And like I said, the people that are going to be speaking up, they are so much closer to the core of things, that they pretty much know that's it. It's a life sacrifice, in many cases, especially if it connects with certain people of prominence in there. And we've seen those connections over and over again in there. So we could definitely see that happening. When we see assassination attempts, it doesn't happen so much to the average person. It's really something that tends to be more evident with people in high profile positions, country leaders, things like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's, another assassination attempt on Trump, or people of his cabinet, Or again, the whistleblowers that are coming out like, yeah, you shouldn't have spoke up. Now we're going to go after you. And some of them may be successful and some of them may not be in there. We're going to see a lot of strong battles going on between world leaders and influential people in the world. So here again, this is going to be interesting because I could see this playing out in a couple of different ways. You're going to have those leaders who are working against people and they're looking for that total control, and they're going to increase tyranny. They're going to increase, removing people's freedoms and things like that. And they're going to order for attacks on people for taking their power back. And again, this is like, we want to make a point of what's going to happen if you speak up against us. So I would look to countries, we could see some of this happening in the UK area because they're having a lot of issues where they're getting tyrannical over social media posts. I mean, that are not even dangerous, or people wanting to protect their kids in some way. And the government's coming in saying, we're going to remove your kids. We're going to, all these crazy things. So I could see it in countries like that. I could see it in countries that are like China, countries like that, where that goes up because, China is one of those countries that has a history for making examples out of people, and taking somebody and making things very violent, aggressive. I mean, go back to the aspects of Tiananmen Square. If you don't know about that, look it up. And they do, and it's horrendous, what they do, and then it gets kids turning even against their parents, and it's just a mess when we go down these paths. And the other thing is that we could even see aspects of corruption turning on corruption, trying to save their own skin. And we could see people being, cast out as the sacrificial lamb, so to say, in things just to protect people higher up or deeper in the system. So that's going to get interesting. That's, again, we're talking the first 3 weeks of the month. Now, in the last week and a half from March 21st, I'm so sorry, I don't know why this is itching so much, but in the last week and a half, 21st through the end of the month, again, we're going to see that continuation of rapid progress for the good guys in there, continued retaliation, continued military naval areas. Some of the areas that might be hit the most would be like islands, coastal regions, using the oceans to make attacks, and to come in and to move in through the ocean areas in there. I think they're going to be the ones that are going to be most there. And again, these are attacks on God or divine presence or divine source in the world. And not so much on the people. There are definitely probably going to be some very innocent people that are going to get hurt in this process. And I think we're going to see more attacks coming in, maybe on people of different belief systems, religions, churches, spiritual practices. It could be a variety of things. The past is going to hold the solutions to this. What we're experiencing in the midst of all this progression, retaliation, back and forth sort of battle going on is history is repeating itself. So we're going to see the same plays that we've seen before coming out again in there. But we are also going to need to go into the history and say, well, what was done before? Okay, that didn't work. That created this effect. What can we do different? So learning from that past and implementing that wisdom and considering what do we do different so that we don't end up with the same result. In there. And we've seen this, whether we're talking financial system, battles between countries, whatever, we've seen that variety. The choices that are made in this last week and a half of the month is going to have a huge impact on what direction we go moving forward. So it has a huge impact on our future. And so we really want to take a look at what policies are being passed during that time, what things are being pushed through, what choices are our leaders making, because that is going to have a strong impact on what we have to deal with as we move forward in the world here. We're also going to see an increasing disgust of the wealthy class. And the good side of this is it's going to bring us back to values. It's going to be bursting that bubble of wealth being something to strive for, or certain status being something to strive for. and more people are going to get disgusted over wealthy people, no matter where they're sitting on things. It's like, yeah, you're sitting here telling me, that I'm going to be okay when I'm still having problems affording food. Like people tell me, oh, the gas prices are coming down. Well, the gas prices are nowhere near what they used to be. They've come down from 3.75 to $2 to what, $3 or something like that. When they used to be, buck and a half, under $2. With the gas that I buy, it is still over $4 a gallon. So it really hasn't come down but 25 or 30 cents. It hasn't dropped like other things. So no, these prices are not just dropping the way they're saying. And that's another frustration I have with certain things, like you guys are saying you're doing all this work, but it's not showing in my market. I can tell you that because I go there and I see the prices, and when it's still $6.50 for a thing of yogurt, don't tell me the prices are coming down when that same container of yogurt used to be 2.50 or $3. So um, again, this is going to disgust people when they're going in saying, you know what, I'm struggling to get that food on my table, and you're flying around the world telling me I'm being too excessive in your private jet, using all these resources and telling me that I need to do more to care for the environment. Well, it's going to strike people wrong. They're not going to tolerate it. And so this is going to bring a downfall of a lot of these arrogant, narcissistic, psychopathic people that have been running things. Because people are just going to be like, get out of my face, get out of my face, get out of my area. And they're not going to take it. Um, we're also going to see more things when we talk about this returning to value. So we're probably going to see more shifts starting to happen. Where a long time, stores felt the pressure. I've now got to be open 7 days a week. I remember seeing those shifts in there, but I think we're going to start to again return to values where stores are going to start saying, you know what, we're not going to be open on Sundays anymore. Now, or we're not going to be open on holidays, or we're going to take these long weekends off and we're not going to do it. Now, you'll have some people, they always will, or they're in a certain industry, they love what they do, they're going to keep doing it. But more and more, you're going to see people going, yeah, we're going to take this day off and our families can go to church. The people that work for us can be with their families at the holidays, things like that. You may not see this as much in like a bigger city, or like a Las Vegas where everything is built around being open 24/7. But I think particularly in the rural communities like where I live, we're going to see more of that shift happening. Um, my town, maybe not so much because it is a tourist town. So like Sunday's a big day for business, but more and more, I think we are going to see people doing that, saying, no, we're going to honor values over profit. And this is a big game changer because when we do that, we invite a lot of divine presence in, and that brings a lot of favorable energy forward with things. Okay. Moving on, what actions? This is our action energy. Where do we focus our actions during this month? Well, throughout this whole month, we need to really look at guarding our health and taking care of ourselves. And I get it, this can be very challenging to do when you feel like you don't have any time to devote to that, but we've got to make the time. We've got to start saying no to certain things. We've got to start re-looking at how we're living our life. How much we're working, things like that. We've got to start finding this balance in things. So health is going to be a huge thing. We want to get outside. We want to disconnect from the news sources, disconnect from the technology. I love that I can bring these videos here, but I'm very, very pro get out there in nature, get out there under the sun, get some fresh air, all of those things that are going to build your immunity, build your body up, and are just sound health practices in their self-care, because it's not just physical health care, it is mental and emotional health care as well in there. We need to do that. Like again, this all around well-being that we have going on here that we need to focus on. if we're not doing these things, we're going to put our bodies in a really vulnerable position to be catching things. And granted, we don't think about that a lot in the northern hemisphere at this time because all the weather's warming up, but it will be definitely more critical in the southern hemisphere where they're going into winter, so they are getting exposed to more things down there. Also, what we're probably going to see coming up is addictions rising during this point, more drug-related stuff, but not just drugs, food-related stuff, right? Addictions to food, addictions to sex, addiction to all of these different things that we have addictions to in the world. And we need to address those addictions because that goes hand in hand again with our health and our well-being aspects. And so this is going to be a big area that needs to be addressed and needs to be focused. So whether you're working on a local area or whether you're pushing your representatives or whatever, this needs to be a big emphasis. And hopefully the representatives that are really tuned in can put an emphasis on this. And that's going to be a big game changer in society. If we can do that, again, talk about those favorable choices, right? We've got to make the favorable choices. And that would be one of them. What can we do to turn this around and to help people and to get them off of these things and to reduce the risk of this happening and things like that? Thoughts, where we need to keep our head from the 1st through the 10th. We need to pay attention to those in power, again, trying to trigger fears and trauma in people. Lots of psyops, lots of head games and brainwashing going on, gaslighting, dramatic threats going on. We have to realize that when they're coming out and they're doing these dramatic things and they're using fear and they're using trauma and they're trying to trigger these things in people, they're probably working from a lot of lies. I'm not going to say it's all lies or stuff, but when you're dealing in the truth, you don't have to use those tactics. You don't have to use those tactics to motivate people to action. So we want to be very careful of that. We don't want to get sucked into that. That's part of what can bring our spirit down. We talked about that already. We may see the unleashing of deadly storms coming in. That fits in with the retaliation. So we might see deadly storms come into an area right after there's been a lot of good or progression happen in there. And we'll probably see a lot of use of weather and tectonic manipulation. Now, I know some people don't buy into that, but again, this technology, you can look it up, do your research, has been around for many, many decades, pushing 100 years or so in some cases. And they do have this ability to do these things. And so a lot of, this is where, is every storm using that technology? No. It's not. But we do need to be alert that there are a lot that are. And, if it's a natural storm, it's probably not going to be a major extreme. It's usually the ones that are really extreme, unpredictable, uncontrollable in nature that have a manipulation weaponry that is being used in there. And again, we talk about this. Remember where I said naval, ocean areas, water areas. So I think particularly our coastal regions are going to have to watch out. So whether you're talking the Gulf regions here in America, whether you're talking the East Coast, the West Coast of America, those are going to be areas that have to be paying attention. Islands, right? The Hawaiian Islands, or even getting out like in Alaska or places like that. Again, even down in the southern hemisphere, right? You got a lot of tropical island regions down there. That's where we're probably going to see a lot of it. We're going to be seeing a lot of diseases amplified, and that's going to be the type of thing where they're going to try to start pushing it. Again, do your research. If there's 2 cases, they're coming out going, oh my God, we got a major pandemic starting, and there's like 2 cases of something. That's not a major pandemic. That is getting started and things. So we have to watch again that fear porn that they're putting out there. And we're going to see an amplification of that. We may see where we're hearing about multiple diseases that are coming up. And I think that is trying to lay the groundwork to get people to make certain choices in regards to flu shots or different things like that. So we have to be very, very careful about that. We don't want to get sucked into those things. We really want to read the no shortcuts. We want to, if you haven't seen that video on shortcuts on my regular channel, Jesse on Nichols George, you want to go in and look at that. No shortcuts, okay? Um, in this. We really want to get in there and take a look at um, what that's doing. They're going to try to stress the body and make the body less resistant. And how do you do that? A lot of times you create stress, you create fear, you create urgency, you create these different avenues. That's going to stress the body out because it puts it into a survival instinct mode, a fight or flight mode that throws the cortisol levels off, that throws dopamine levels off, it throws all kinds of things off in the body, stresses your adrenals, it affects the pineal gland, it affects the hypothalamus, it affects all these different things, your body's ability to process. So your kidneys, your liver, all these things that get affected in the body when it gets stressed. And so the more stress they can make people, the harder it is for their immunity to work in their body. So that's going to be a tactic that we have to be careful of. And where does that stress come from? Again, it's going to come from this mental warfare component going on, these psyops going on. They're trying to get in your head is what they're trying to do to stress you out so that you don't have any defenses against things. Because what happens is when our brains are stressed for a certain amount of time over a certain long period, it literally goes into shutdown phases. It literally cannot think or concentrate. And that's a dangerous zone to be in there. Um, but on the good side, I think we're going to see a lot of these attempts thwarted, a lot of them backfire along there. And this is going to be the result of natural instincts, survival instincts kicking in for people. And so, on one hand, that's not going to be pleasant to be in that survival space. On another aspect, it can be exactly that sort of what we call fear that jolts people into reality. And that is a good thing. Again, not pleasant, not something we want to be, staying in for any period of time, but it can be beneficial if it wakes some people up, if it gets them realizing the actual reality of things in there. Okay, from the 11th through the 26th, where the thought, the mindset is going to be, where we want to keep our focus around that. We got to balance the extremes out. If we are balancing between one extreme and another extreme, we're not going to get anywhere. It's nothing but battle and fight. We've got to find a way to balance the extremes out. So even if you're doing that personally in your life, like, okay, I need to step off of watching 50 videos a day and I need to go get myself out into nature. I need to meditate. I need to sit down and have a meal with family or friends or whoever and have some actual conversations with people, these sorts of things. Finding where you can balance extremes in your life. That's going to be an important thing. And we need to, again, encourage those in leadership positions, empower positions or positions of influence to find the ways to balance these extremes. It's like coming to a peace agreement, right? It's like we both have our things that we want and we're opposing each other. Well, somewhere we've got to meet in the middle if we're going to have peace. And I think that is the thing. Now, if those extremes can be met, if we can come into that balance, we very well could see some peace agreements coming through. We very well could see some things getting resolved, which would be a great thing. We want to focus on sharing our wisdom. So not shutting it off, not hoarding it, not holding it back. We want to, again, have actual conversations with people, share the wisdom we have. Oh, what did you hear about this? Oh, well, okay. And I heard this. So if we put these pieces together, what does that tell us? And, and besides those pieces, what actually happened besides what we're both hearing and what our perceptions are of things. So drawing on this wisdom piece and sharing the wisdom going to be very important. Greater realization why we don't want to be reliant on government and controlled organizations. And I think part of this comes back to, as I talked about, when you see those tyrannical levels go up, when you see the freedoms being taken away, the rights being taken away, the attacks on the people, things like that, that is going to help people see this is why you don't want them running everything. This is because you're not going to have a say over your own life if you do. And so that's going to wake some more people up because again, I think so many people have naively, not intentionally, but naively trusted that these groups and organizations and governments were working in their best interest when they haven't been. And so again, this big wake up call in there. Also, I think mentally, we're going to be tested to see if we can choose wisely. Can we see the truth of something as opposed to the illusion that is being presented to us? You know, this is again, if we tie this into some of the drug things that we have, you know, addiction things that we have in the action category, for example, it's like, you know, the drug appears like, look, it's great. It's going to make you feel wonderful. It's going to be, you're going to go into this ecstatic state and see all of these visions and blah, 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 blah. And then you get it and you take it and then you start to come down off of it and it's horrible and you're laid out for a week and, you know, you're getting sick and everything else. And, you know, your heart's racing and all these other effects that come once you get past that pleasure point. Whereas, you know, somebody else says, hey, just come over here and, you know, let's do some connecting, whether that for you is going to church or meditation or yoga class or whatever it is, just come into divine connection and you'll have all the pleasure you want and it will stay there. It doesn't go away. It's not going to have a bad after effect, you know, like a hangover the next day or something like that. Um, so I think that's where we have to stop and look at what are we actually choosing? What is the truth of what we're choosing? Not just what it appears like, not just, you know, giving into the temptation. We have to be very careful because, again, they're going to make things very tempting to us, to our mind, right? To our human self, our human drives and desires. And we have to look past that and choose wisely and choose, you know, choose the path that truly nourishes us, not just the path that appears to do that or temporarily does that. And there, we need more lasting results in that. The 27th through the end of the month, we're going to be tested again. You know, can we choose things wisely? So again, this testing component in there, that's mostly going to be at the end of the month, not so much in those middle part of the month. And we need to look at again the reality of something with that. We need to choose earthly pleasure or divine blessings, and we need to choose true success and happiness. So we're going to be presented, look, you can have this temporary pleasure. We'll let you have this pleasure, this treat for a year. We're not going to tell you that, you know, your life is going to be trashed and you're not going to be able to do anything after that, but we'll give you a treat for a year. Well, that's an earthly pleasure. Okay. We'll give you a trip to Caribbean if you'll just spend, you know, $100,000 on a timeshare condo. You know, uh, we have to watch out for those temptations in there, and we have to be choosing what gives real pleasure again, and that comes from within. That comes from God, divine source energy in there. And we need to again choose what is the true success, what offers the true happiness, not just the earthly physical sense, but the true one that sustains us, which builds us up, which holds our spirit strong, those sorts of things. And the temptations at this time in these last few days of May are going to be extra, extra deceptive. So again, we have to have our guard up and we may just want to, you know, hold off. And again, the key is we don't get to the good stuff in this energy pattern. We don't get to the good stuff until we can turn down the temptations because we're actually not strong enough. We don't have the resistance enough to handle the good stuff actually until we have the strength to turn the temptations down. So it's kind of like, you know, if you have somebody who you want to make the head of your company, and you know, you have to be able to trust that person. You have to know that they're going to make smart decisions, right? And if you come in and you give them some money and you tempt them a little bit, and they take that temptation over holding to values and what actually is going to take care of people in the company, well, that's not somebody you want running your company because they're going to sell out to whoever the highest bidder is. They're going to end up trashing that company in there. So, You need somebody who's strong enough to stand up to those temptations and turn them down for what's so-called right, for, what is truly good and benefiting people and not just lining their pockets to make them one of the elite. So the same sort of thing. We can do that even on our own scale, even in our own basic lives. We have to be able to turn down what isn't healthy to get to the good stuff. And that's going to take a little doing for some people. We need to be able to stand in the truth to see the truth, right? If you're living in lies and deception and manipulation, you're not going to see the truth in there. And those lies and deception and manipulation is going to magnify. But when you stand in the truth, you can see through all of them. And this is a key. We've got, again, have that strength to stand in the truth there. If we can do that, if we can stand in truth and we can stand in integrity, if we can uphold divine values along the way, then what we're going to do is we're going to see corruption expose itself. And what's going to happen in that is they're going to be unhappy that we're standing in the truth and the integrity and upholding these values. They're probably going to try to come after us in some way, whether we're, maybe not so much us as individuals in everyday life, but we might see this play out on some of the bigger stages, as they say, in the political arenas. And they will start to try to sabotage those people who are standing in truth and integrity. And when they do that, they're going to expose themselves. They're going to end up exposing their own corruption, their own agenda, their own lies, their own deception in there, because they're going to be so desperate to get rid of those that are holding the truth in there. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out, because that can go a lot of different directions, right? That could go from censoring people, that can go, from focusing on churches, as we said, some of the religion stuff, some of the faith, the belief systems, based groups or people being under attack, those sorts of things. They could, have people come down on them. But again, it's going to be so obvious when they start to do it, when they start to take these moves. And so really all we have to do is hold the truth and integrity. And if we do this, they will expose themselves. We don't really have to do anything beyond that. And then that's going to be a great thing. Now on the soul energy, and yes, this plays into world events, political arenas, and things like that. In the soul's energy, we've got to let the soul self, God, divine source, lead the way in things. Values are our guideline in doing that. Okay. We've got to have strength or mastery or command over those human desires and urges. And we've got to let the soul energy, we've got to let divine source, we've got to let God, we've got to let that lead and guide us. And that comes into look at your spiritual values, look at your virtues, these sorts of things. They will be the guidelines for what to do in things in there. So very, very important with that. We need to look at the facts and not our perceptions and things. Very important, because it is so easy, especially when we're getting triggered by things, especially when we're reacting to things. It's very hard to see the actual facts when we're in that reaction. So we have to step back a little bit, and we have to say, okay, this is what it looks like to me, but let me come in and do a narrative account of things. And sometimes if we can put ourselves in that narrative account, right? It's just like if a police officer is going to record an incident, they're not looking for what you felt or what you thought things were. They're just looking at the strict account, at 6 o'clock, this person took this action. At 6:30, they took this action. A very narrative account. That's where the facts are. Okay. That's a big piece of that. Ethics in the heart is critical right now to what we need to focus on from this whole aspect. So again, we all have these things that we want to see happen in the world. Leaders all have their things that they want to push through in the world. But no matter what is going through, there has to be ethics and heart in it. This is very, very critical if we are to move forward in a favorable direction. If we are to make wise choices, it can't be all about the money in there. Yes, we need to be a strong country. Yes, we need to flourish. Yes, we need all of these things. But we have to balance that with caring about people. We have to balance that with nurturing our resources and taking care of our environment and, you how that impacts things beyond the financial bottom line of things in there. So ethics, very, very critical. Is somebody actually caring about people in there? And are we working from the heart? Are we having a compassion component within strengthening ourselves in there? A lot of manipulators are going to be teaching us the depth of deception in there. So again, remember I said they're going to expose themselves if we hold our ground. And this is going to show us that we can't trust everything that's presented to us. So when I start looking at that, that's going to probably bring more exposure probably in the media areas, I would say, because they're the ones that are presenting things to us. We may also find more layers of how much is staged when people are giving press conferences and things like that. How much is orchestrated behind the scenes of, okay, I need you to say these words. I need you to make this point when you're in front of the cameras. I think we're going to find out how much more is staged, and that's going to be hard for some people to deal with, but it's also going to be that awakening point that you cannot trust everything that's being presented. Also, it's going to be teaching us about wise action and how does that happen? That comes when we lead by example. That means those people who are walking in morals, those people who are walking in ethics, they're the ones that we want to be following. They're going to be showing us, look, this is how you can do things in a wise way, in a stable way. And they're going to be leading by that example. So, if they're talking morals and values and ethics, for example, they better be living in those in there. And that's what people will need to see. And everything has a purpose and a reason for being done. This is a hard thing for us to see, especially when we have things happening that don't make sense, that we don't understand that is going on, is realizing that there is a purpose, there is a reason behind it. And again, this ties in with some of the deception. It may be hard to see what that purpose or reason is behind something at this point in time. Now, it will become visible down the line, but there's going to be a certain component of trust that has to happen to realize, like, I don't like what I'm seeing, but there is a deeper reason behind it. There's a reason why it's being done this way. And no, I don't think we should just blindly accept things. But at the same time, I think we also need to realize that there's probably some things going on behind the scenes that we're not given the information on. And when you talk about political arenas, there's a lot of that. And so, there's almost always reasons behind what they're doing. For one way, for better or worse, there's almost always reasons behind what they're doing in there. So keeping that in mind as well. And then attacks being used to bring forward facts and show inversion tactics. So there may be people that actually, in a way, serve as so-called bait for people to come in and attack them, to call violence upon them, or things like that, specifically to show these inversion tactics that go on, because those are the types of people, when they're working in those inversion tactics, remember, those are the people that make what is good look bad and what is bad look good. That's those inversion tactics. And that's how a lot of riots, revolutions, and things like that get started, is through these inversion tactics. So we may see some things that are staged in order to bring this out so that people can see it happening. And then victory comes through lawful and ethical action. So when some of these things come up, these attacks are made, it's not about reacting and doing battle. It's about going, thank you very much for that piece of information. Now I have something to take to the courts. Now I have my proof. So again, keeping that in mind, again, purpose and reason behind things. And this is that soul's energy of working in there. So that is what we have going on for May, right? There's actually, some big stuff in a way happening. I think we're going to see a lot of things in many ways happening during this month. And hopefully you'll tune in and you'll maybe want to come back and watch parts of this video and go, I remember her talking about that a bit. In there, if you've enjoyed this information, if you find it interesting, share it out, give the channel a like, subscribe, give the video a like, share it out. Those things all help me. This is a small channel. I'm not making any profits off of it. Certainly I appreciate when people send donations my way, but I'm just here putting out the information I have to work with and sharing it with you. And again, if you want to stay on top of all the different components, because what I share in these videos is a small component of what you find in this book right here. Again, 2026 will be coming out in August, but you can always pick up your copy. It's both paperback and ebook. Yes, it's a chunky book to work with, but I think you'll find it really interesting, and I think that you'll find there's a lot of good information to have heads up on in there, and it can really help you know, here's the time I should be more out there. Here's the time I should lay low a little bit more. Here's where I can make my impact. Here's what I got to be aware of. And that helps a lot when we're maneuvering through the world in here. And again, you can find that on my website, compassioncodes.com. Jump onto the goods tab, select the code journey. I've got the links to get you directly to the purchase pages in there, and go from there. So take care, everybody. I'll see you next month when I'll be bringing June's information in for you. And in the meantime, have a very safe and good and prosperous, blessed month ahead of you. Take care.